Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Sonia McGowan with Covenant Pediatric Wellness Center. Getting ready to do our webinar. So we're going to give people just a couple minutes to come in and get situated, and then we will get started. So just a couple of housekeeping things. You will be granted access to the replay. You will get that link a couple hours after we're done. And so you can watch that for an unlimited amount of time. I will give my contact information at the end in case you want to email me any questions or any thoughts, or if you're interested in becoming a patient. Also, there is a chat box and a Q&A box. So if you have questions as we move through the webinar, definitely drop those in either the chat or the Q&A box, and I'll do my best to answer those as we go through. All right, so happy Friday, happy Labor Day weekend. I hope that if you're watching live, you have registered for the Autism One conference. That's going on this whole weekend. It's virtual, so you can watch from the comfort of your own home. I'm actually a speaker, so you might enjoy some of what I have to say. So, all right, it's right at 12. I am kind of funny about time, so we're just gonna get right with it. So today, I'm starting a webinar series called Test, Don't Guess. And so what I really rely heavily on in my practice with complex kids is using appropriate tests to uncover the why behind kids' behaviors. And so we're starting that series today talking about the organic acids test, and very specifically the Metabolomix, which is includes organic acids in that report. So a lot of you probably know me already, but again, I'm Dr. Sonia. I have a practice in Jefferson City where I live with my husband, Shannon, here, as you can see. He is a CPA, and he is just a phenomenal guy, and I'm so happy to be his wife. So we have two kiddos. Here you see Libby. She is now 20, living in Kansas City, living her best life. She's done with school. She's a music director for the School of Rock in Kansas. So, and then this is Rowan. He is sort of the reason why my practice looks the way it does. I really love this picture of him because he was just a little guy, had lots of, sensory and behavioral issues back then. This was us attempting a haircut that did not go very well. So we just took him to college, 2.5 weeks ago or so. And he is doing well so far as a theater major at college in Illinois. And this is Lola. She needs angel wings in this picture. She went to heaven just after Christmas of last year, and I still can't bring myself to take her off my slides. And this is a really special person to me. His name is Mitch. He was a guy I worked with at a habilitation center when I was in college. And he taught me so much about the way I think about people with complex needs. And he really sort of helped me direct my career and even helped me name the practice. So, all right. So in terms of the Covenant practice, we have two arms of the practice. We have Covenant Chiropractic, and at that part of the practice, we really focus on complex kids. We do brain-based chiropractic, we do functional nutrition, and a big part of what I'm going to be talking about today fits right there. We also have the Spot for Tots, and this is a very highly specialized part of our clinic that works with kids with oral restrictions. So lip tie, tongue ties, cheek ties, evaluation, all of the therapy before and after the releases. We do a lot of work with moms, pregnant moms, and new babies. We also do a lot of focus on detox here. So we have hyperbaric oxygen therapy. We have the ion cleanse foot bath. And again, typical folks can come for testing as well. So we do food, allergy and sensitivity testing, hormone panels, things like that. And then kind of the second half of our practice is Covenant Pediatrics. We have a DO pediatrician on staff. Dr. Hannah Strong has been with us since January. And so we are an integrative clinic with medical and chiropractic together. So we're awfully proud of that. All right. So really the cornerstone of everything that we do here at Covenant is to figure out the why behind behaviors. So there are no purposeless behaviors. There are no bad kids. It's up to us to figure out what is going on, because the why behind those behavior, language, and socialization challenges really matters. And so that's our jam, is to use whatever means necessary at our disposal to figure out why a kid may be experiencing the challenges that they are. So today we're going to talk about organic acids testing. You will hear it referred to as OAT testing. So organic acids testing, and I'm really going to lean heavily on explaining to you the Metabolomix from Genova Diagnostics. I really love this test. I love the organic acids test because I find that it is a really powerful way to, again, test, not guess, to figure out what is happening in a child's chemistry that could be contributing to their behaviors. So what are organic acids? They are intermediate products formed during various metabolic pathways, including energy production. So if you watched my webinar in August, that's what we were talking about in terms of mitochondrial dysfunction in complex kids. So energy production is mitochondrial function, right? And breakdown of neurotransmitters, and then other processes as well. So these particular molecules are then excreted in urine after making it through those metabolic pathways. And so whenever we see deviations in those levels, that gives me information to figure out, okay, what's going wrong here? What are the disruptions? What are the inefficiencies? And then it allows us to then create interventions that are specific to exactly what that child needs. So how is this connected to complex kids? Why do we care about organic acids? So what we know is that kids with autism and other complex needs have some really consistent metabolic findings. So on paper, kids with autism and other complex needs look really similar. And so some of the ways that we see consistencies, very, very frequently, we see mitochondrial dysfunction. So kids really struggle to turn the food that they're eating into energy inside the mitochondria. Go back and watch my mitochondrial dysfunction webinar if you haven't already, because it's really going to help you understand why this is the most important thing that we need to look at. And it's the first thing we need to look at, because if you can't make energy inside the cell, we can't expect the body to do higher level things like have a robust immune system, like have good poops, etc. And so other consistent things that we see across complex kids are also nutrient deficiencies. So we will generally see deficiencies in B vitamins, antioxidants. So those are nutrients like vitamins A, C, E, alpha lipoic acid, CoQ10, etc. Minerals. So really, really common to have low magnesium, to have low zinc. And so knowing it is really important, because those minerals are helpers to the B vitamins and some of the other nutrients in the system. Minerals are also really calming, right? And so they help with detoxification. So we have to have the right levels of all of these things in a child's body if we expect their metabolism and their biochemistry to be effective. Also really common to see deficiencies in fatty acids, omega-3s in particular, but it's also important to look at the other ones, the omega-6s, 7s, 9s, because again, these are things that are very commonly deficient in kids. We also see pretty consistent intestinal dysbiosis. So an imbalance, in the beneficial and the not so beneficial flora. So we will see things like malabsorption due to a yeast overgrowth, a bacterial overgrowth. And remember, whatever happens in the intestine is reflected in the brain. I remember teachers of mine would say the brain marinates in gut hormones. So whatever's happening in the belly is happening in the brain. And so if the gut isn't healthy, the brain can't be either. So it's important for us to know that. We also see real differences in neurotransmitter metabolism. So it's common for us to see some inefficiencies or some dysregulation in things like serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, et cetera. So these are the chemical messengers that really govern our mood, our motivation, our sleep-wake cycles, et cetera. And so we need to know, does this child struggle to manage their neurotransmitters effectively? And then another really common thing that we see is impaired detoxification pathways. And so that's why we focus really heavily here with the ion cleanse and with the hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because it's really, really common for me to see kids who just aren't good at detoxifying. So how does doing this test change intervention? So one of the things that drives me crazy is when parents come to me and they've been to other providers who have done lots of good testing, but the problem is that the provider isn't experienced enough to know how to use the test to guide their treatment approach. So what I love about the organic acids test is when you know what you're doing, when you find a provider who knows what they're doing, the organic acids test is very impactful in terms of what do we do for this child. I love it because it's urine, right? So generally, urine is easier to gather than blood, for sure. It is a first morning urine, so it needs to be concentrated, but collecting urine, and even in little, smaller kids who aren't yet potty trained, we have our ways. We've got some pediatric urine collection kits that work pretty darn well for most parents. So I just love that it's non-invasive, right? It allows me to be very specific in my intervention plan. And, what I don't like to do from my own perspective, I don't want to give a pill for every ill, right? Whether it's a pharmaceutical, which I'm not licensed to do, or if it's supplements, right? We don't want to just play whack-a-mole and give something for every little thing that's wrong. What I like to do is do the organic acids test and get the big picture. I want to know all the data. Let's see everything that's happening with this child so that then I can use my education and clinical experience to prioritize and say, okay, all of these things are findings, but these are the 3 that we're going to focus on right now. We're going to fix what we can fix, reassess, and go from there. So because we've tested, we're not guessing about what a child needs. We can be very, very specific and very, very intentional about what we're doing. So let's jump in, and I'm going to show you a sample report. This is actually a report of a patient of mine, a little guy. And this is the Metabolomix from Genova Diagnostics. Within this test is an organic acids panel. And so I tend to use this one the most because I feel like it just gives us so much data. Not to say that I don't love the organic acids test from Mosaic Diagnostics, because I do, and I use it a lot. But I'm gonna just start here with the Metabolomix from Genova. So this is the first page. So it gives us an overview of different pillars that we're looking at. So we're looking at how much does this child need antioxidant support? How much do they need mitochondrial support? How much do they need support around inflammation? We also, I got to put my cheaters on because it's pretty small, a need for reduced toxic exposure. And then how much do they need support around methylation pathways? So this gives you just a quick summary of sort of where the child stands in terms of their overall metabolic processes. And as you can see, this child, has a lot of needs, right? So, and actually for this child, mom was astounded because, they cook all their food at home, they eat organic, right? And so diet was an early priority for this family. And even with an extraordinarily clean diet, the child was still really, really struggling here. So this is a scale that goes from 0 to 10 on the summary. So that's first page. Second page of the Metabolomix is telling us about deficiencies. So we've got here antioxidants, we have B vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, and then it also gives a summary of the level of GI support that child needs. So as you would expect, green is good, yellow and red are not. And as you just sort of, scan down this child's report, you can see pretty much all of these factors are significantly deficient. He also needs a high level of digestive support in the form of both digestive enzymes and probiotics. There are some intervening pages here that I'm not covering with you that basically gives all of this data, but in more detail. So it will explain each one of these nutrients. It will tell you why a child might be deficient. It will explain and describe some symptoms of deficiency. And then a bullet point that most parents really like is that it also gives, the top 10 or so food sources for that particular nutrient. So for example, if this mom is worried about vitamin A and she really wants to address that with diet, this report will give a rundown of which foods are going to give the highest levels of vitamin A, for example. All right, now, when we come on over and we look at the section that's telling us about malabsorption and dysbiosis. So here we go. This is basically a glimpse into intestinal health. Now, this is not a stool test. Remember, it is a urine test, but it will give us sort of some intro data as it relates to intestinal health. It cannot tell us exactly which bacteria are overgrowing. It cannot tell us levels of the beneficial bacteria. It can't tell us how much or which kind of yeast. It basically just says, is bacteria overgrowing? Yes or no. Is yeast overgrowing? Yes or no. And then we can use this data to decide, should we go ahead and do a stool test? So here we can see this child had very significant malabsorption markers, right? So they're quite elevated here in the red. And we can see he also has elevated bacterial markers and elevated yeast markers. So based on this, we went ahead and did a comprehensive stool analysis to just dive a little bit deeper, again, so that we can be very specific and not guess. Below that, then, we are given the mitochondrial markers. So this is breaking down basically how efficiently can this child turn his food into energy. So here we look at fatty acid metabolism. So can this child take their dietary fats and turn them into energy? This child is not very efficient doing that, right? And remember that we get more energy per calorie from fat than we do carbs or proteins. So it's very important that we optimize a child's ability to make energy from fat. This is telling us how efficiently can he make energy from carbs. Again, not very well. And then this next section here is the actual Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle. So this is the process inside that mitochondria that helps us make ATP, which is the energy currency for the body. And so what we're seeing here is he's really, really struggling. So he has major mitochondrial dysfunction based on the data given to us in this section of the test. So see how valuable this is? So in one page now, only really half of one page, we've discovered intestinal dysbiosis. We've gotten a very specific look at mitochondrial function. If you have questions, don't forget you can drop those in the chat or the Q&A box. All right, now let's look at another section here. So this is telling us about methylation markers right here. Most of you have probably heard about methylation, right? So it's a chemical pathway that's heavily involved in DNA expression and detoxification. Kind of the popular buzzword over the last couple of years has been talking about the MTHFR gene mutation. And so that's related to methylation. So this test gives you just a little glimpse here of how those methylation pathways are looking for this child really struggling with methylation. Now remember, methylation really relies on vitamin B9, folate, and vitamin B12. And so we know he was really deficient in both of those. So we have to expect that methylation would be compromised, right? It just makes sense. These are biotin markers. So biotin is B7. We can see this child is elevated. Again, he was quite deficient in B7, so we would expect his biotin markers to be out of range. This is the next section telling us about neurotransmitters. So remember how I said in the beginning, it's really common for complex kids to have neurotransmitter dysregulation. And so here we've got chiarenine markers, we've got quinolinic acid markers. These can sometimes be, specifically the quinolinic acid can tell us a lot about inflammation, about potentially high glutamate, because quinolinic acid is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So we want the right balance here between Ka and Qa. When we come down, these are catecholamine markers. So they're going to be telling us about dopamine, epinephrine, etc. And so you can see there's a lot of these molecules in his urine. So instead of using these molecules to make something like dopamine, they're passing out in the urine. And then this is the serotonin marker, 5-HIAA, tells us about serotonin. And so again, his is quite high. So from this, we can determine his neurotransmitters are quite dysregulated. Then we get a look at toxin and detox markers. So it's giving us information on plastics and styrofoams, as well as a petroleum derivative called MTBE. So this just gives us a glimpse how, what's the toxic load like? What are detox pathways like? But remember, you've got to have good mitochondrial function in order to have good detoxification pathways. You've got to have plenty of minerals as well to detoxify. We know those are problems from earlier pages. So we definitely are not surprised that the toxin markers for this child are elevated. So this test goes on to talk to us about oxalates. So many of you probably have read about oxalates as they relate to your child, but these are crystals that would give you or I a kidney stone, a tonsil or bladder stone, etc. For kids on the spectrum or other complex needs, they tend to not be very good at managing oxalates, and these can promote some discomfort in the body. And so generally, oxalates come from three places. They can come from high oxalate foods. So things like, spinach, green leafy things tend to have a lot of oxalates. Oxalates will come from intestinal yeast. They can also come from parasites in some cases. So what do we know, right? We know that he eats a good diet. Family eats really clean, whole foods. So could diet be a possibility? Sure. But we also know he's got yeast in the intestine. So here we see all three of the oxalate markers are elevated. So oxalate management is a challenge for this child. And we definitely want to look at that as part of his big picture. And then here is a commentary on oxidative stress. So just a note about oxidative stress. It occurs when there's an imbalance between the production of what we call reactive oxygen species and the body's ability to detoxify and get rid of them. And so when you have high reactive oxygen species with limited ability to rid your body of them, it can result in damage to different parts of your chemistry. So it will damage, your lipid molecules. It can damage DNA. It can damage other cells in the system. And there's research out there that talks about, specifically autism is highly correlated to high oxidative stress. And so having a practitioner who understands that and how to reduce the reactive oxygen species load is really important. So this test does give you specific information on 2 different oxidative stress markers. All right. Now, so remember I said this was a urine test. There are some add-ons that you can include that your doctor can order with this particular test. One of them is to add on fatty acid levels. And so it adds just a little bit of cost. It is a finger stick. So you would need to prick your child's finger and put blood on a special paper. All of those materials are included in the test kit, but it does require that finger stick. But it gives you, and I'm sorry this is kind of small, but it gives the omega fatty acid levels. So we have omega-3 right here, and you can see this child, compared to the rest of his test, actually doesn't look too bad with his omega-3s. Could we optimize this? For sure, yeah. But I'm really happy to see that at least a couple of his omega-3 types are where they need to be. Over here we have omega-6s, and then down here we have omega-7s, and then over here we have omega-9s. And then you also get a breakdown of each of the saturated fatty acids. It gives a little bit of cardiovascular risk. We're generally not too worried with that when it comes to kids, but people of any age can do this test. So it's a really nice breakdown of the fatty acid status, and knowing that generally this is an area of very high need for most complex kids. This is a nice feature to add on. You can also add on a couple of other things if you want to look at urine metals as well. So we can do a toxic element clearance. We can do a toxic and nutrient element test as well. So it would look at, the minerals, where kids stand with minerals, and then it will also tell where they stand with the toxic metals. So things like, tungsten and arsenic and aluminum, mercury, those kinds of things. And to add the test to the Metabolomix is less expensive than doing the test as a standalone in pretty much every case. All right, so that was the Metabolomix from Genova Diagnostics. This is the organic acids test from what used to be Great Plains Labs, now called Mosaic Diagnostics. And so with the organic acids test from this particular lab, you can see that the report format, of course, is different. The first page starts out with yeast and bacterial metabolites, and it breaks it down also to include Clostridia markers as well. And then when we jump over here, it gives us, again, sorry for the small type, but it gives us information about mitochondrial function. It gives us information about deficiencies, though not quite, in my opinion, as comprehensive as the Metabolomix. This is telling us about fatty acid oxidation. Again, this is the deficiencies section. So, if you're sort of below this mean level, that means that you've got some deficiencies in those areas. It also gives you a look at amino acids, as does the Metabolomix. So again, very, very comprehensive tests, very impactful as it relates to how we get data that we can do something with that will impact a child's intervention plan. Okay, so what do we do now that you know something about this test? What do we do with it? So in general, this is the first test that I consider for most complex kids. I feel like based on the amount of data that you get for the price and the data that we can actually do something about, I think it's absolutely, the right thing to consider out of the gate for most kids. Again, I use Genova Diagnostics and Mosaic. This is a test that needs to be ordered by your doctor. And sadly, there are few just mainstream doctors who are familiar with this test or how to interpret it. So, your mainstream pediatrician isn't really going to know about how to order this test, how to interpret it, and create a plan from there. Now, if you have a MAPS doctor, absolutely, they're going to know what this is all about. But it's not something that you should expect to go to your pediatrician and say, hey, I want to do an OAT panel on my kid. Let's do that. You're going to need to get a more specialized physician for that. So I love to use this test for lots of reasons that I've stated, but basically it gives information specific to those metabolic patterns that I mentioned early on, right? So everything that are consistent findings across complex kids, this test touches on. So it'll tell us about deficiencies. It will tell us about mitochondrial function. It will tell us about their fatty acid levels. It will tell us about their intestinal health, right? So all of those things, it checks every box. And so while it's an investment, it's not cheap, it does give a lot of data, and that data translates to interventions. So if you do the organic acids, the Metabolomix section with the fatty acids add-on, and that's generally, the most common thing that I do, it's $354. Genova does offer a payment plan. I'm not super familiar with it. Most parents just talk to the lab on their own about that. There is the potential to bill insurance. It really just depends on where the family stands with their out-of-network deductible. So both Mosaic and Genova are considered out-of-network labs. So if you've met your out-of-network deductible, it can reduce your cost. So definitely worth, checking with your insurance company about. So let me go back. So if we decide to order this test for a child, if the child is here in the office with me, then I will give a kit to parents. I explain how to do it. You go home, you collect the first morning urine, you put it in to vials that you freeze and label and send back to the lab via FedEx. It's all included in the cost of the test. When the lab gets the specimen, I will have results in 2 weeks. So very fast turnaround. From there, then I will review results and my recommendations with parents. If you are a telehealth patient, I ship the test to you. You collect it, gather the urine, freeze it, send it off. Both tests are the same. They're both urine. Very, again, non-invasive, easy to manage. You pay the lab directly. I'm not part of that process. And so for, $350, you've got a really good assessment of what's happening with your child and how we can help them. So Kim, hi, you're one of my favorite people. I love learning from you. Thanks for the webinars. I've had the pleasure of collaborating with Covenant with 8 different kids, and it's been the best investment ever. Super impressed. Well, thank you, Kim. I appreciate you trusting me with your kids and your nieces and nephews for sure. So again, keep in mind whenever, whether you're working with me or not, keep in mind that doing testing is very important, but you want to make sure you're working with a practitioner who knows what the particular most pertinent tests are to order based on your child and their history and their presentation. And then from there, that they can explain those results to you very clearly, and then they can take those results and turn it into a plan. So just handing you results doesn't do you any good. You need a partner who can understand, explain, and implement an action plan based on those results. Otherwise, you've just, you've wasted your money, you've got a fancy report, and you don't know what to do with it. Part of the reason that I feel so strongly about this is when Rowan was younger, my son, and was really struggling with a lot of different things, I stumbled upon a functional provider who recommended a version of this test to me. And when the results were back, he handed me the report and said, "You can probably analyze this better than me." yeah, that really wasn't very helpful, right? And so it made me mad, and I then dug in and I researched literally every line of that test to figure out what it all meant, and made my own plan for him. And so after living through that, I decided that's not how we were going to do it in my clinic. And so when families come to me and we run this test, my standard procedure is to analyze the test and write all the findings. So I'll say, this is high and here's what it means, or this is low and here's what it means. And then I give you written recommendations based on those findings. Julie says, thanks to Kim for referring me. Oh, yay. Well, hi, Julie. It's nice to meet you. I'm here for any questions that you have, particularly if you've got a kid with any kind of challenge. So that's kind of our thing around here. So, all right. So remember, the why matters. So if you've got a child who has lots of findings on a test like this, well, you have to expect they probably don't feel very well. They're not functioning at their highest level. So no wonder they have behavior, language, socialization challenges, right? No bad kids, no purposeless behaviors. We have to look at their chemistry to figure out what is promoting the challenges that they're having. You can do speech therapy all day. You can do chiropractic adjustments all day. But if there is faulty chemistry, nothing is going to fix that unless you know what it is and you put the right interventions in place. So here's my contact information. Again, we're in Jefferson City. We have several providers on staff. We have myself. We have a new associate chiropractor starting with us next month, Dr. Nieper. We have Jackie Stuber, who's our physical therapist. And then we've got some part-time therapists. We've got Liz Rackers is our occupational therapist. We have a lactation consultant on staff as well. And then, of course, we have our pediatrician, Dr. Hannah Strong, who is on staff. So any questions that you would have, you can definitely email me. So Dr. Sonia at covenantwellness.net is by far the best way to reach me. We are taking new patients. Dr. Hannah Strong is taking new pediatrics patients. Dr. Nieper and myself also are, she's taking new chiropractic patients. I'm taking new complex kids always. Even no matter how busy I get, I'm always gonna take kids, because we just have so many kids who need specialized help that only we can give them. So yes, we may have a bit of a waiting list here and there, but we are definitely taking new folks. So that's that. So yay, Metabolomix organic acids test. It's the bomb. It's worth the money. It's definitely great, even if you don't have a complex kid necessarily. So let's say you've got maybe a teenage daughter with maybe some menstrual symptoms, a lot of PMS, a lot of mood things. If you've got, I see teenagers who they're neurotypical, but maybe they have some mood issues. Maybe they have a lot of fatigue. Maybe they have, recurrent illnesses, some anxiety, sleeping issues, things like that. Even for kids like that, this test is an appropriate thing to do, because it can really get to the bottom of what we're looking at. Julie says, I'm going to email you. Great. Okay. I can't wait. I can't wait to meet you, Julie. All right. So as you can tell, I love this test. I do a great deal of this particular test. I do not profit from it. I don't mark up the test. What the lab charges is what the lab charges. I just find that it's such an incredibly powerful tool to bring kids toward recovery, that I'm pretty happy to share information about it and help parents understand what it's all about. So thanks for your time. I hope everybody has a great Labor Day weekend. And again, if you have any questions at all, just shoot me an email, Dr. Sonia at covenantwellness.net. Thanks for coming. Have a good weekend.